Hi. In this lecture, we're going to talk about a type of decision making known as multi-criterion decision making. And the idea here is that there's lots of different dimensions, and you've got a couple choices, and you're trying to figure out which choice, sort of makes you happiest, which choice you think is sort of the better of the two, or three or four, right? So how does this work? We're going to do this in two ways. We're going to first do it qualitatively, and then we'll do it quantitatively. So let's do a qualitative assessment first. By that I mean just sort of no numbers, right? It just means sort of like which is better. Let's suppose you're looking at a house. This is a very small house, but let's suppose that you're looking at a house and you're trying to decide, should I buy this house, or there's some other house down the street and I'm also looking at that. Now, if you think about making that sort of decision, a house has all sorts of dimensions to it, right? So there's square feet, there's the number of bedrooms, there's the number of bathrooms, there's the lot size, there's the location, there's the condition of the house, there's all these things. So if you sit there and you go through one house and you go through the other house and you try and keep all these things in your head, that can be really, really complicated. So one way to do multi-criterion decision making is just to say, okay, look, let's just create a chart like this. Let's create the following model where these are the dimensions right here. These are all the dimensions I'm going to decide on. And then for each house, right, house 1 and house 2, I have a column. So now what I can do is I can write down the square footage of these houses. So I could say, this house is maybe 2,000 square feet, and this house is 1,800 square feet, right? And number of bedrooms, I could say maybe this house has 4 bedrooms, and this house has 3 bedrooms. So house 1 is sort of bigger with more bedrooms. But house 1 may only have 1.5 bathrooms, whereas house 2 has 3 bathrooms. Then I look at the lot size, and maybe this one is only 1/4 acre, and this one is 1/2 acre, right? And then I look at the location, and the location, now this maybe I put miles from work, maybe this is 10 miles from work, and maybe this is 15 miles from work. And then last I can ask, okay, what's the condition of the house? And maybe this one is excellent, and this one is only good. Well, now what I can do is I can just go down for each of these criteria and say, okay, which one wins, right? So what I can do is I can say, okay, well, on square footage, this one wins. On bedrooms, this one wins. On bathrooms, house 2 wins. On lot size, house 2 wins. On location, because this is distance to work, house 1 wins. And on condition of the house, house 1 wins. So what I get is that house 1 gets a total of 4, and house 2 gets a total of 2. So what I can do is I can say, well, look, house 1 seems like a better house, right? Because it wins on 4 of the 6 criteria. And this is a way, one way to make decisions. You can do this on other issues as well. A few years ago, the state of Michigan had a referendum called the Michigan Civil Rights Initiative. And this essentially was a referendum saying that state employees, state employers, including the universities, could not give preferential treatment to women or underrepresented minorities. So what I did with Liz Suhey, who was a grad student at the time at the University of Michigan, was we put together a decision theory guide for people to help make this decision. So what we did is for each of the different dimensions of this issue, how it was going to affect things like equality, the quality of education, help or harm women, social cohesion, reward merit, and whether it was an appropriate limit or not, we wrote a guide that sort of laid out the argument for the MCRI and against the MCRI. And then what a person could do is they could go down each of these dimensions and say, I'm in favor of the MCRI, I'm against it, right, and so on, and then count up the columns and say, okay, there's 4 reasons why I should support it and 2 reasons why I should be against it. Or alternatively, someone might read through these things and say, boy, on every one of these dimensions, I think we should reject the MCRI and vote against it. So what this was is this was a guide to help people recognize the dimensions, weigh the alternatives along those 2 dimensions, and then make hopefully more informed choices. So when you think about how you vote or how you buy a house, this can be really a useful way because there's so many dimensions, right? What you do is you just lay out each dimension, put columns for the alternatives, and then decide which alternative is better on which dimension, and then add those up and make a choice. So let's go back to our house case. So I do this, I put down all the criteria, and I list house 1 and house 2, and then it says, okay, I should buy, after doing this, right, remember we came down and we had 4 reasons why I should buy house 1 and 2 reasons why I should buy house 2, and I say, okay, therefore, I'm buying house 1. But suppose I do that, and I don't like house 1. I've done this analysis, and in my gut, I say, you know what? I don't like house 1. I really like house 2. Well, there's a couple things going on. One is maybe I'm missing some criteria. Maybe house 2 is a Spanish-style house and house 1 is a craftsman house, and what I really like is Spanish-style houses. Well, if that's the case, right, what I should do is I should go back to my criteria and add Spanish-style house. But if I do that, that's still only going to make it 4-3. Well, what can I do then? Well, one thing I can do then is I could say, well, do I really like house 2? Right? Is it really the case I like it, or is there something really irrational in what I'm doing? Is it some sort of romantic attachment to house 2, when in fact, when I look at it somewhat objectively, according to the criteria that I care about, house 1 is better? Well, another way we can go, a more sophisticated multi-criterion decision-making model, is to take into account quantitative weights, right? To not only just take into account qualitatively which is better, but actually quantitatively to measure the differences. So what do I mean? So now I can say, okay, here's all these things I care about, right? And let's suppose now that I've added in here that I also care about the basement. So now there's house 1 and house 2, and maybe again house 1 wins on square feet, number of bedrooms, but it doesn't win on bathrooms or lot size, and it wins on lot location and condition, but suppose house 2 wins on basement, right? And before I had this total of 4-3. But it could be that, square footage doesn't matter to me that much, nor does number of bedrooms. So I give each of these 1. But number of bathrooms matters to me 2, and lot size matters to me 2. Location and condition don't matter to me very much, and having a basement is incredibly important. Well, now, if I do this, house 1 gets a total of 1, 2, 3, 4, right? And house 2 gets a total of 2, 4, 6. And so now it's house 2. And so what I see is, okay, what really was going on here is that when I put in how much I care about these dimensions, I realized that's the reason why in my gut I sort of felt that house 2 is better. Now again, let's think about this. Remember we talked about we don't want to let the models tell us what to do. We want the models to help us make better choices. So if I'm buying a house and I write down all the criteria and I compare 2 houses, and I see, boy, according to my own criteria, house 1 is better than house 2, but in my heart of hearts I prefer house 2, that doesn't mean we shouldn't buy house 2, but it does mean we should ask ourselves, are there criteria we're leaving out, or are there weights, so we can at least understand ourselves and know why we're making the choice, and we know we're not making it because perhaps we liked the blue curtains in the living room or something, right? So it helps us make more rational choice. So that's sort of normatively why these things are so useful. Positively it's useful because when we see somebody else buy a house and we see, boy, house 1 was better on every dimension except for lot size, we can then infer, wow, this is someone who cares a lot about lot size. Okay, there we go. So that's it, multi-criterion decision making. What you do is you list all your criteria, take your alternatives, and you say which one wins on each criterion. Now, you can also add weights and make it more quantitative, so some criteria matter more than others. Again, 2 ways we can use it. One is make better choices ourselves, right? We just saw how when we're deciding whether to buy a house or how to vote, this can be really useful. And second, we can use them to understand the choices of others. Thank you.